So hello and welcome to this quick tutorial for Blender with Octane, where I will show you how to create such an engraved logo within the shader editor of Octane with Blender. And it's just a material, it's nothing with topology. If I go into the solid shading view, you can see that on this cube, the mesh is basically just a cube, and it's all inside of the shader editor, but we get this engraved logo. Um, just so you know what you need an image file of your logo with smooth edges. I will show you on the screen right now what I mean by that. In my case, it's this Octane logo, and just apply inside of Photoshop or any other um, editing software, apply such a smooth edge, because we need that to get a good gradient between both of our materials inside of the um, shader over here. Um, just so you know what's going on the left side up here, I have my viewport, just the normal viewport as you know it from Blender, inside of the rendered view, so that we can see what's going on in our scene and with our material, of course. Down here I have just the world shading, so it's the shader editor, and set to world, because in here is just a simple HDRI so that we can see what we do with our material, and that we have some lighting on our object. So that's important. Just add in a quick HDRI and nothing fancy. And here on the right side I have the shader editor set to object, so that we can see the material that we created for this cube, where we basically create this effect of the engraved logo. So like that, this is not a really complex material. We will go through everything step by step, and then you should be fine. So let's start. So as you can see, the cube is not there anymore. I just hid the object from the viewport and the render, so that we can start all over again. So I will add in, I will go into the viewport over here. So this is just the viewport on the left, and in here we can press Shift A and we go under mesh and we just add in a simple cube. Now we take this cube, and for us, in order to see the engraving a little bit better, I have the camera pretty close up to the cube, and I want a little bit of tilt, so that we can see the edges a little bit better of the engraving. So I just take my toolbar, and in here I go to the rotation tool and I just rotate this cube a little bit. And now I will take yes, I just move it a little bit to the side, so the camera is looking right at the center of the face, facing the camera. So that's it for that. Now we have the object, and the rest will be all inside the shader editor here on the right. So we are inside of the shader editor. Just click here and then make sure that it is set to object. So I will go into the viewport and press numpad 0, just so that we are inside of our camera view. And now I will just activate the shading, and as you can see, we are just looking at a plain face of our cube, because the cube is not textured or doesn't have a material yet. Okay, I just deactivate the toolbar so that we can see a little better what is going on. And now I select my cube, this cube over here. It's selected, and up here in the shader editor we can click on new material, and it automatically applies a universal material to the material output node. So we have a universal material on our cube. Just so we go through the material step by step, I will delete this universal material, although we will need universal materials in a second. So the first node we need to add into the material output is our mixed material node. So we have the mixed material node here, and we take the material out of the mixed material and plug it into the surface connector of the material output. Like that. That's totally fine. And now we have to create our first universal material. So we press Shift A and we search for a universal material. Here we have it, and we will plug it into the second material connector of the mixed material node. Okay. Okay, so this will be the second material inside of our engraving. Basically, this is the material that is outside of the engraving, so for the cube in our case. So I will turn this down in the albedo, just almost black, because we will be able to see a little bit more contrast to our other material like that. Roughness is actually fine, and we can leave the rest. I add a little bit of metallic just so that we have a little bit more reflections on the material. Okay, that's fine for now. Now we just need another universal material. We go over here and press Shift A again and search for another universal material like that, and we take the material out of the other universal material and we plug it into the first material of the mixed material node like that. And in here I want a shiny metallic material. So we take up the metallic value to 1, and we can even take the roughness down to around 0.03, but we will adjust the values in here in a second. So now we have both of these materials set up. Now we have to define how they are distributed around the cube. And this is where our texture comes in, because we want to use our black and white texture that you created either in Photoshop or another software with the smooth edges, and we want to use that as a mask for our bump map. So we go up here and we just add in with Shift A an image texture. Otherwise, you could just drag and drop the picture in here. That would also work. In my case, I will open it up like that. So I go to the image texture and I click on Open. And in here, I now have to look for my texture. In my case, it's on the desktop. And here should be my material. That looks great. Just open image. And like that, the image is open. And now I can take the image texture out and plug it into the amount of our mix material. So as you can see here on the rendered view, we have a huge image now distributed over our cube. That's not really what we are looking for. So we have to adjust some values in here. The first thing that we have to change is we have to change the projection from wraparound to white color, like that. And now there is only one image projected over our cube, and we don't have, when we scale the image or the image texture down, we don't have a lot of image textures scattered around the cube, but only one. And you will see what I mean in a second, because we now have to add in a box projection. So we just press Shift A again and search for a box projection. And we take the projection out and we plug it into the projection of our image texture. And like that, we have one big Octane logo in here. And as you can see here, we have smooth a smooth transition between the two materials we set up earlier, these two universal materials. The one is the black one and the other one is the metallic one. And just like that, we have our mask set up, but we need to further do some stuff in order for this to look right, because now we have the transition but not the engraving that we want. So I want to scale this texture down, and I just click on here and it will automatically add a transform value node. And in here we can select the scale by clicking into the first slider and then holding the left mouse button and dragging down till all three sliders are selected. Now I can drag to the left or the right to increase or decrease the scale, and I want the logo to be about this big. That's okay. And now I want to show you what I mean by changing this to white color. If I take this and put it to wraparound, we have a lot of these Octane images projected onto this face. But if we set it to white color or black color, it's just one. If we put it to black color, you can see that we have this kind of border, and it basically takes the our selection, what is the transition is not correct. So if your logo on the image texture you use is white and your background is black, then put it to black color. But in my case, the logo is black on my image texture and the background is white. So we have to put it to white color for it to look right. And now you can see that the metallic material is on the outside and the black metallic material, basically this universal material is the logo one, and this one is the one for the background. But of course, I want the metallic silver one to be the logo, and the universal material that is black should be the background. In this case, if you want it like that, just leave everything like it is. But in my case, I want to change that. You can either take the material outputs of the universal materials and just switch them, put the one that is now plugged into the second material into the first material and the other one into the second material. That would do it, but you can also go to the image texture over here, and there's this little box where you can say invert. If I click that, it's inverted, and now we have the silver material for our logo, and we have the black universal material for the background or the cube in general. So how do we get the effect that it is engraved into the cube? Because for now it looks really flat, there's not really an engraving into the cube, and we will deal with that in a second. First of all, I want to decrease the reflection a little bit, just like that. Maybe like that. And now we want to get to the important part of engraving the texture. So that part might not be as complicated as you think. So it's actually pretty easy. We just take the image texture that we now created for the mask of how the universal materials are distributed over our cube. And we take this image texture now and we use it as a bump map for both of the universal materials. And we have to adjust a few things about our image texture for this to look right, but that's actually quite an easy part. So we take the second universal material, the one that we plugged below the first material, and I will just take it and put it beneath the first universal material because it's a little bit easier to work. And now we will take the image texture and the transform value and the box projection, and we take these nodes and we put them back here it's easier to work for us because we can connect them easier into the universal materials. So the first thing that you might notice when we take the material out or the image texture out and plug it into the bump connector of our universal material is that we get this kind of edge. If I zoom in here on the left in our viewport, you can see that we currently have light coming from in front, and you can see that there is this kind of edge. If I go out of the camera view and we zoom in, you might see that we now have a bump that is coming out of our cube and not going into our cube. It's not that easy to see, but this is because our logo is black in the image texture that we use. This one, the image texture is using a black color value for the logo and a white color value for the background. That makes it so that the black part is coming out, so our logo is basically coming out of the cube and not going inside of the cube to be an engraved logo. And for that, we need to change this output that goes into the bump of the universal materials, and we want to invert that. So we press Shift A and search for an invert node. And here we have the invert texture node. And we just take it and put it in between the image texture and the connection of the bump material or the bump input for our universal material. And like that, you might see that it is now going into our cube instead of coming out of it. That's exactly what we want. So I press 0 again to go back to our camera view. And now we can take the texture out of our invert texture node, and we can go down to our second universal material and we plug it into the bump as well. So now our image texture is going into this invert texture node, and we connect the texture out of this invert texture node and we plug it into both of the bump connectors of our universal materials. That's great. Now we want a little bit more control over the edge or the engraving edge of our logo. And for that, we want a gradient texture. So we press Shift A again and search for gradient texture. Here it is. If you're using a newer version of Blender with Octane, this will be called gradient map. It's exactly the same node in its core. There are a few more settings in the newer versions of Octane with Blender, but that is not really important for this tutorial. So we just take our gradient texture or our gradient map and we put it in between the image texture and the invert texture. So inside of your gradient texture, you will have this slider, this gradient that you can change the black values in, or you can change the white values. And we just want to bring the white value a little bit more to the left. And like that, you might be able to see inside of our rendered view that we have this engraved effect happening. And of course, you can also change these values to your liking. If you want a more reflective edge of your engraving, you can choose that as well. I will just leave it like, yeah, maybe like that, or I will even bring the white value a little bit in for the engraving to not be as reflective. And like that, we have created our engraved material inside of Blender with Octane. You can obviously control the two materials that we use for the cube and the logo inside of both of the universal material nodes, like for example the albedo. If I take this one to something like purple, you can see that we have a purple logo now. Or if I change that back and I go down to the second universal material down here and I go into the albedo and change it to something green, you can see that we have a green cube with a silver engraved logo. So that should be it for this video. I hope I could help you out with creating such a material, and I think it looks great. If you could follow along, please leave a like. If you are interested in more content about Blender with Octane, please subscribe to my channel. And in the end, there will appear a playlist where all of my Blender with Octane tutorials are available to you. So thank you and see you next time.